Okay, I think they tried to knock me over because they turned off the lights right as I was hitting the steps, but I survived, so better luck next time. Anyways, greetings, parents and students and friends and relatives. Thank you so much for coming. We look forward to this all year. I think this is our third year doing this, and every year it just seems to become more and more of a tradition. The students have worked hard, and it's just a great way to help kind of welcome spring. And so I'm so glad you guys are here. I'm actually the most boring part of this whole evening. It's just going to get better and better from here. We're going to start with a greeting from Roy Kyle that is almost worthy to be a recitation in and of itself. So students, memorize it, because someday this will be a recitation for you as well. Roy, come on up.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and welcome to our celebration of the spoken word. Tonight, we gather to appreciate the timeless beauty and power of poetry and classic speeches. As the great English poet Samuel Taylor Coleridge once said, "Poetry is the best words in the best order," and we are here tonight to revel in that perfect order. Now, I know what you may be thinking. An evening of poetry and speeches. How thrilling. But fear not, my dear audience. We have a few tricks up our sleeves to make sure you're thoroughly charmed and entertained. And no, I'm not talking about a poetry slam where we pit poets against each other in a battle to the death, though that would be entertaining. Instead, we have assembled a group of talented performers who will be reciting works from some of the greatest poets and orators of all time. And if that's not enough to impress you, we'll also be serving some delicious refreshments to keep you fueled and energized throughout the evening. Just think of us as your literary bartenders, serving up sonnets and speeches instead of martinis and mojitos. So sit back, relax, and let the words wash over you. And who knows, maybe by the end of the night, you'll be inspired to pen your own masterpiece, or at the very least, you'll have a newfound appreciation for the power of language. Thank you, and enjoy the show.
So Robin lay watching the friar, and the friar, all unknowing he was so overlooked, ate his meal placidly. At last he was done, and began talking to himself. "Dear lad, thou art the sweetest fellow in all the world. I do love thee as a lover loveth his lass."
"La, thou dost make me shame to speak so to me in this solitary place, no one being by. And yet, if thou wilt have me say so, I do love thee as thou lovest me."
Oh. "Nay then, wilt thou not take a drink of good Malmsey?"
"And thou wilt force it on me, so I must needs do thy bidding. Yet with the more pleasure do I so, as I drink thy very great health." "And now, sweet lad, 'tis thy turn next."
"I take it, sweet Chuck, and here's wishing thou as much good as thou wishest me."
"Canst thou not sing me a song?" "La, I know not. I am but in an ill voice this day. Canst not hear how I croak like a frog?" Nay, nay, thy voice is as sweet as any bullfinch. Indeed, I would rather hear thee sing than eat a fair feast."
"Alas, I would rather not sing before one that can pipe so well, and hath heard so many goodly songs and ballads. And yet, if thou wilt have it so, I must needs do thy bidding. But now, methinks that thou and I could sing some merry song together. Hast thou not heard of a certain dainty little catch called The Loving Youth and the Scornful Maid?"
Why, methinks I have heard it ere now."
"Then Dost thou not think that thou couldst take the lass's part if I take the lad's?
I know not, but I will try.
The loving youth and the scornful maid. And it's wilt thou come with me, my love, and it's wilt thou love be mine. For I will give unto thee, my love, gay knots and ribbons so fine. I'll woo thee, love, on my bended knee, and pipe sweet songs to none but thee. So come thou and be my love.
Now, get thee away, young man so fine. Now get thee away, I say, for my true love will never be thine, and so thou hadst better not stay. Thou art not a fine enough lad for me, so I'll wait till a better young man I see, and never I'll be thy love.
Then straight will I seek for another fair she, for many a maid can be found. And as thou wilt never have aught of me, by thee will I never be bound. For never is blossom in the field so rare, but others are found that are just as fair, so I'll seek me another dear love.
Young man, turn not so very quick away. Another young love to find. Methinks I have spoken in haste today, nor have I made up my mind. And if thou wilt only stay with me, I'll love none other sweet lad but thee.
Here, Robin could contain himself no longer, but joined in with the chorus. He and the friar sang, or, as one might say, bellowed. So it's hark, 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 to the winged lark, and it's hark to the cooing dove, and the bright daffodil groweth down by the rill, and I'll be thine own true love. So they sang, for the stout friar did not seem to notice that the yeoman had joined in with the song, but kept on bravely to the end, he and Robin finishing up with a mighty roar that could have been heard a mile.
Now, said Mrs. Pepper, after the first excitement was over, you're all so comfortable together, and Phronsie doesn't want me now. I'll go to the store. I must get some work if Mr. Atkins will give it to me. I'll be all right, Mamsie, now that Ben's here, cried Phronsie, settling into her chair with Phronsie on the stool at her feet. I'm going to tell them stories, Ma, said Ben, so you needn't worry about us. Isn't it funny, Ben, said Polly, as the gate clicked after their mother, to be sitting still and telling stories in the daytime? Rather funny, replied Ben. Oh, do go on, said Joel, as usual, rolling on the floor in a dreadful hurry for the story to begin. Little David looked up quietly as he sat on Ben's other sides, his hands clasped tightly together, just as eager, though he said nothing. Well, once upon a time, began Ben delightfully, and he launched into one of the stories that the children thought perfectly lovely. Oh, Benzie, cried Polly, entranced as they listened with bated breath. However do you think of such nice things? I've had time enough to think the last week, said Ben, laughing, to last a lifetime. Do go on, put in Joel, impatient at the delay. Don't hurry him so, said Polly, reapprovingly. He isn't strong. Ben, said David, drawing a long breath, his eyes very big. Did he really see a bear? No, said Ben. Oh, where was I? Why, you said Tommy heard a noise, said Polly, and he thought it was a bear. Oh, yes, said Ben. I remember. 'Twasn't a... Oh, make it a bear, Ben, cried Joel, terribly disappointed. Don't let it be not a bear. Why, I can't, said Ben. 'Twouldn't sound true. Never mind. Make it sound true, insisted Joel. You can make anything true. Very well, said Ben. I suppose I must. Make it 2 bears, Ben, begged little Phronsie. Oh, no, Phronsie, that'd be too much, cried Joel. That'll spoil it. But make it a big bear, do, Ben, and have him bite him somewhere and most kill him. Oh, Joel, cried Polly, as David's eyes got bigger than ever. So Ben drew upon his powers as storyteller to suit his exacting audience and was making his bear work havoc upon poor Tommy in a way captivating to all, even Joel, when, "Well, I declare," sounded Mrs. Pepper's cheery voice coming in upon them, "if this isn't comfortable." "Oh, Mamsie," cried Phronsie, jumping out of Polly's arms, whither she had taken refuge during the thrilling tale, and running to her mother, who gathered up her baby. "We've had a bear, a real live bear we have, and meet him." "Have you?" said Mrs. Pepper, taking off her shawl and laying her parcel of work down on the table. "Now that's nice." "Oh, Mamsie," cried Polly, "it does seem so good to be all together again." "And I thank the Lord," said Mrs. Pepper, looking down on her happy little group, and the tears were in her eyes. "And children, we ought to be so good and please him, for he's been so good to us."
O Lord, how long will you forget me? Forever? How long will you look the other way? How long must I struggle with anguish in my soul and sorrow in my heart every day? How long will my enemies have the upper hand? Turn and answer me, O Lord my God. Restore the sparkle to my eyes, or I will die. Don't let my enemies gloat, saying, "We have defeated him." Don't let them rejoice at my downfall. But I will trust in your unfailing love. I will rejoice because you have rescued me. I will sing to the Lord because you have been good to me. Only fools say in their hearts, "There is no God." They are corrupt and their actions are evil. Not one of them does good. The Lord looks down from heaven on the entire human race. He looks to see if anyone is truly wise, if anyone seeks God. But no, all have turned away, all are corrupt. No one does good, not a single one. Will evildoers ever learn? They eat up my people like bread and wouldn't think of praying to the Lord. Terror will grip them, for God is with those who obey him. The wicked frustrate the plans of the oppressed, but the Lord will protect his people. Who will come from Mount Zion to rescue Israel? When the Lord restores his people, Jacob will shout with joy, and Israel will rejoice.
The afternoon sun was getting low as the rat sculled gently homewards in a dreamy mood, murmuring poetry things over to himself, and not paying much attention to Mole. But the Mole was very full of lunch, and self-satisfaction, and pride, and already quite at home in a boat, so he thought, and was getting a bit restless besides. And presently he said, "Ratty, please, I want to row, now." The rat shook his head with a smile. "Not yet, my young friend," he said. "Wait till you've had a few lessons. It's not so easy as it looks." The Mole was quiet for a minute or two, but he began to feel more and more jealous of Rat, sculling so strongly and so easily along, and his pride began to whisper to him that he could do it every bit as well. He jumped up and seized the sculls so suddenly that the rat, who was gazing out over the water, saying more poetry things to himself, was taken by surprise and fell backwards off his seat with his legs in the air a second time, while the triumphant Mole took his place and grabbed the sculls with entire confidence. "Stop it, you silly ass!" cried the rat from the bottom of the boat. "You can't do it. You'll have us over." The Mole flung his sculls back with a flourish and made a great dig at the water. He missed the surface altogether. His legs flew up above his head, and he found himself lying on top of the prostrate rat. greatly alarmed, he made a grab at the side of the boat, and the next moment, sploosh. Over went the boat, and he found himself struggling in the river. Oh my, how cold the water was, and oh, how very wet it felt. How it sang in his ears as he went down, down, down. How bright and welcome the sun looked as he rose to the surface, coughing and spluttering. How black was his despair when he felt himself sinking again. Then a firm paw gripped him by the back of the neck. It was the rat, and he was evidently laughing. The mole could feel him laughing, right down his arm and through his paw, and so into his, the mole's, neck. The rat got hold of a skull and shoved it under the mole's arm. Then he did the same by the other side of him, and, swimming behind, propelled the helpless animal to shore, hauled him out, and set him down on the bank. A squashy, pulpy lump of misery. When the rat had rubbed him down a bit and wrung some of the wet out of him, he said, "Now then, old fellow, trot up and down the towing path as hard as you can, till you're warm and dry again, while I dive for the luncheon basket." And so the dismal mole, wet without and ashamed within, trotted about till he was fairly dry, while the rat plunged into the water again, recovered the boat, righted her, and made her fast, fetched his floating property to shore by degrees, and finally dived successfully for the luncheon basket and struggled to land with it. When all was ready for a start once more, the mole, limp and dejected, took a seat at the stern of the boat. And as they set off, he said in a low voice, broken with emotion, "Ratty, my generous friend, I am very sorry indeed for my foolish and ungrateful conduct. My heart quite fails within me when I think how I might have lost that beautiful luncheon basket. Indeed, I have been a complete ass, and I know it. Will you overlook it this once, and forgive me, and let things go on as before?" "That's all right. Bless you," responded the rat cheerily. "What's a little wet to a water rat? I'm more in the water than out of it most days. Don't you think any more about it. And look here, I really think you had better come and stop with me for a little time. It's very plain and rough, you know. Not like Toad's house at all. But you haven't seen that yet. Still, I can make you comfortable, and I'll teach you to row and to swim, and you'll soon be as handy on the water as any of us." The mole was so touched by his kind manner of speaking that he could find no voice to answer him, and he had to brush away a tear or two with the back of his paw. But the rat kindly looked in another direction, and presently the mole's spirits revived again, and he was even able to give some straight back talk to a couple of moorhens who were sniggering to each other about his bedraggled appearance.
Oft I heard of Lucy Gray, when I crossed the wild. I chanced to see at break of day a solitary child. No mate, no comrade Lucy knew, she dwelt on a wide moor, the sweetest thing that ever grew beside the human door. You yet may spy the fawn at play, the hare upon the green, but the sweet face of Lucy Gray will never more be seen. Tonight will be a stormy night, and you to the town must go, and take a lantern, child, to light your mother through the snow. That father will I gladly do, 'tis scarcely afternoon. The minister's clock just struck 2, and yonder is the moon. At that the father raised his hook, and snapped a faggot band. He piled his work, and Lucy took the lantern in her hand. No blither is in mountain row, with many a wanton stroke. Her feet dispersed the powdery snow that rise up like smoke. The storm came on before its time, she wandered up and down, and many a hill did Lucy climb, but never reached the town. The wretched parents all that night went shouting far and wide, but there was neither sound nor sight to serve them for a guide. At daybreak on a hill they stood that overlooked the moor,
and thence they saw a bridge of wood a furlong from their door. They wept and turning homeward cried, In heaven we all shall meet, when in the snow the mother spied the print of Lucy's feet. Then downwards from the steep hill's edge they tracked the footprints small, in between the broken hawthorn hedge and by the long stone wall. And then an open field they crossed. The marks were all the same. They tracked them on, nor ever lost, until a bridge they came. Then from a snowy bank the footmarks one by one, into a plain, and further there were none. Yet some maintain to this day that she is a living child, that you may see sweet Lucy Gray upon the lonesome wild. Or rough or smooth she trips along, nor never looks behind. She sings a solitary song that whistles in the wind.
Cornelia, he said, settling his bulk in a velvet chair too small for him. I understand you have no alarm system in your house. This is purest folly. Also, I'm given to believe that you are not carrying on regular drills for your guests. I was always amazed at how well Pickwick knew what went on in the Bay. You know that a raid may come any day, Pickwick continued. I don't see how you can avoid one. Scores of people in and out, and an NSB agent living over cons up the street. Your secret room is no good to you if people can't get to it in time. I know this leader. He is a good man and a very passable electrician. Get him to put a buzzer in every room with a door or window on the street. Then hold practice drills until your people can disappear in that room without a trace in less than a minute. I'll send someone to get you started. Leander did the electrical work that weekend. He installed a buzzer near the top of the stairs, loud enough to be heard all over the house, but not outside. Then he placed buttons to sound the buzzer at every vantage point where trouble might first be spotted. Finally, we were ready for our first trial run. The purpose of these drills was to see how rapidly people could reach the room at any hour of the day or night without prior notice. A tall, sallow-faced young man named Mr. Smith arrived from Pickwick one morning to teach me how to conduct the drills. Mealtimes, he said, that's a favorite hour for a raid, also in the middle of the night. He strode from room to room, pointing everywhere to evidence that more than 3 people lived in the house. Watch wastebaskets and ashtrays. He paused in a bedroom door. If a raid comes at night, they must not only take their sheets and blankets, but get the mattress turned. That's the SC's favorite trick, feeling a warm spot on the bed. Mr. Smith stayed for lunch. There were 11 of us that day at the table, including a Jewish lady who had come the night before and a Gentile woman and her small daughter, members of our underground who acted as escorts. Betsy had just passed around a stew, so artfully prepared you scarcely missed the meat, when, without warning, Mr. Smith leaned back in his chair and pushed the button below the window. Above us, the buzzer sounded. People sprang to their feet, snatching glasses and plates, scrambling for the stairs, while the cat half clawed up the curtain in consternation. Cries of, "Faster! Not so loud!" and "You're spilling it!" reached Father, Betsy, and I as we hastily rearranged the table and chairs to look like a lunch for 3 in progress. "No, leave my place," Mr. Smith instructed. "Why shouldn't you have a guest for lunch? The lady and the little girl could have stayed too." At last, we were seated again, and silence reigned upstairs. The whole process had taken 4 minutes. A little later, we were gathered around the dining room table again, and Mr. Smith set up before him the incriminating evidence he had found. 2 spoons, a piece of carrot on the stairs, and pipe ashes in the unoccupied bedroom. Everyone looked at Yussi, who blushed to the tips of his large ears. Also those. He points to the hats of the mother and daughter still dangling from its pegs. If you have to hide, stop and think about what you arrived with, besides which you're all simply too slow. The next night, I sounded the alarm again, and this time, we shaved 1 minute, 33 seconds off our run. By our 5th trial, we were down to 2 minutes. We never reached Pickwick's ideal of under a minute, but with practice, we learned to jump up from whatever we were doing in 70 seconds. Father Tooze and I worked on stalling techniques, which we would use if the Gestapo came through the shop door. Betsy invented a similar strategy for the side door. With these delaying tactics, we hoped we could gain a life-saving 70 ticks of a second hand.
Corey, she said excitedly. He's given us the answer before we asked, as he always does, in the Bible this morning. Where was it? Read that part again. I glanced in the long, dim aisle to make sure no guards were in sight, then drew the Bible from its pouch. It was in 1 Thessalonians, I said. We were on our third complete reading of the New Testament since leaving Scheveningen. In the feeble light, I turned the pages. Here it is. Comfort the frightened, help the weak, be patient with everyone. See that none of you repays evil for evil, but always seeks to do good to one another and to all. Seemed written expressively for Ravensbrook. Go on, said Betsy. That wasn't all. Oh, yes. To one another and to all. Rejoice always. Pray constantly. Give thanks in all circumstances, for this is the will of God in Christ Jesus. That's it, Corey. That's his answer. Give thanks in all circumstances. That's what we can do. We can start right now to thank God for every single thing about this new barrack. I stared at her, then around me at the dark, foul-aired room. Such as, I said, such as being assigned here together. I bit my lip. Oh, yes, Lord Jesus. Such as what you're holding in your hands. I looked down at the Bible. Yes, thank you, dear Lord, that there was no inspection when we entered here. Thank you for all the women here in this room who will meet you in these pages. Yes, said Betsy, thank you for the very crowding here. Since we're packed so close, many more will hear. She looked at me expectantly. Corey, she prodded. Oh, all right. Thank you for the jammed, crammed, stuffed, packed, suffocating crowds. Thank you, Betsy went on sincerely, for the fleas and for. The fleas? This was too much. Betsy, there's no way even God can make me grateful for a flea. Give thanks in all circumstances, she quoted. It doesn't say in pleasant circumstances. The fleas are a part of this place where God has put us. A couple of weeks later, Betsy was waiting for me, as always, so we could wait through the food line together. Her eyes were twinkling. You're looking extraordinarily pleased with yourself, I told her. You know, we've never understood why we've had so much freedom in the big room, she said. Well, I found out. That afternoon, she said there'd been confusion in her knitting group about sock sizes, and they'd asked the supervisor to come and settle it. But she wouldn't. She wouldn't step through the door, and neither would the guards. And you know why? Betsy couldn't keep the triumph out of her voice. Because of the fleas. That's what she said. That place is crawling with fleas. My mind rushed back to our first hour in this place. I remembered Betsy's bowed head, remembered her thanks to God for creatures I could see no use for. Though Betsy was now spared the heavy outdoor labor, she still had to stand the twice-daily roll call. As December temperatures fell, the roll call became a true endurance test, and many did not survive. One dark morning, when ice was forming halos around each street lamp, a feeble-minded girl, 2 rows ahead of us, suddenly soiled herself. A guard rushed at her, swinging her thick leather crop, while the girl shrieked in pain and terror. It was always more terrible when one of these innocent ones was beaten. Still, the officer continued to whip her. It was the guard we had nicknamed the Snake, because of the shiny dress she wore. I could see it now, beneath her long wool cape, glittering in the light of the lamp as she raised her arm. I was grateful when the screaming girl at last lay still on the cinder street. Betsy, I said, when the Snake was far enough away, what can we do for these people? Afterwards, I mean. Can't we make a home for them and care for them and love them? Corey, I pray every day that we'll be allowed to do this, to show them that love is greater. And it wasn't until I was gathering twigs, later in the morning, that I realized that I had been thinking of the feeble-minded, and Betsy of their persecutors.
Raskolnikov went straight home. He felt so confused and bewildered that when he got there, he just threw himself on the sofa. He sat for merely a quarter of an hour, merely resting, trying somehow or other to collect his thoughts. He didn't even begin thinking about Nikolai. He felt dumbfounded. There was something inexpressible, incredible in his expression, something that he was unable to grasp. But Nikolai's confession was a genuine fact. But the lie had to be uncovered. The consequences of it immediately became clear to him. The lie had to be uncovered, and then they would come after him. But at least he was free until that time. But he absolutely had to do something, because the dangers were unavoidable. But to what degree? The situation began to clarify, recalling in rough form in general the entire recent scene with Porfiry. He kept shuddering once again in terror. Of course, he still didn't know all of Porfiry's aims. He couldn't fathom all of his recent moves. But a part of his game had been revealed, and nobody, of course, could understand better than he how terrifying this last move was. A little more, and he may have given himself away completely in actual fact. Knowing the morbidity of his character, having understood him and grasped him from first glance, Porfiry was acting with almost certainty, although too decisively. There was no argument. Raskolnikov had already compromised himself too much, but no facts had yet been established. It was all only circumstantial. But did he really understand now? Wasn't he perhaps making a mistake? What perhaps did Porfiry had planned for today? What had he been doing for today? What exactly was it? Had he been waiting for something or not? How could we have parted today if that unexpected disaster with Nikolai hadn't occurred? But a part of Porfiry's game had been revealed, and of course, he took a risk, and he knew it. So it seemed to Raskolnikov. And if he had really anything more, he would have shown it. But what was that surprise? Was it a joke? Does it mean anything or not? Could it have concealed something? Could it have concealed facts or a positive accusation? Where was this man from yesterday? Where was he? Who is he? If Porfiry had anything related to a positive accusation, it had to come from the man from yesterday.
And Lucien sang on his way home that day. He saw himself walking up for his prize in front of the amazed school. Perhaps they would like him better after that. He ran straight up to the old man's house to share the news. The old man was pleased and as sure of Lucien's success as Lucien was himself. "But why try a horse?" he asked. "You could submit to a Noah's Ark. It is very well done for a boy of your age." Lucien shook his head. "That is a present," he said firmly. "A present? Who for? A little brother?" "For a little boy who has hurt himself and cannot walk." "Indeed? How did he do that?" "He fell over and down in the ravine."
Poor little fellow. How did that happen?
Lucien did not answer for a moment. But the fact that this old man had befriended him and been nice to him made him want to speak the truth. He looked up at last and said, "It was my fault that he fell. I dropped his kitten over and he tried to get it. He could have bitten his tongue out and he had said it. Now the old man would hate him and drive him away like everybody else. But he didn't. Instead, the old man said, very gently,
'So that is why you said you have no friends.'
'Yes.'
'And you are trying to make it right to the child with this toy?'
'Yes.'
'You are doing a good thing. It is hard work to win back love. Do not be discouraged. Those who persevere find more happiness in earning love than in gaining it.'
'I don't quite understand you,' said Lucien thoughtfully.
'I mean that if you spend your time putting the love of your heart into your deeds for those who are not your friends, you may often be disappointed and discouraged. If you keep on, you will find happiness in loving, whether you are loved back or not. You may think it strange that I, who live alone and love no one, should say this to you, but I believe it all the same.'
That evening, the Noah's Ark was finished, and Lucien, with a flushed face and hammering heart, set off for the Bernier chalet to leave it on his way home. When he came within sight of the chalet, he hid behind a tree. What would he say? How would he break the silence? If he could see Danny alone, it would be easier, but Annette was always with him when school was out. Surely they would forgive him when they saw the Noah's Ark. If only they would forgive him and give him a chance, he would gladly spend the rest of his life trying to make up. And torn between hope and fear, Lucien came out from behind his tree and walked towards the chalet. Danny's bed had been carried in. Annette sat alone on the veranda, patching her father's jacket elbows. Lucien swallowed hard, walked up the steps, and held out the Noah's Ark. "It's for Danny," he whispered hoarsely. Then his words stuck in his throat, and he stood waiting with his eyes fixed on the ground. Annette took the Noah's Ark from him, her face white with fury. "You dare come here," she burst out at last. "You dare offer presents to Danny? Go away, and don't you ever come here again." And as she said it, she flung the Noah's Ark with all the strength of her young arm into the woodpile below. All the little animals lay scattered on the logs. Lucien stared at her for a moment. Then he turned and stumbled down the steps again. His efforts had been all for nothing. He would never be forgiven. It had been one long waste of time. It was then the old man's words came into Lucien's mind like a tiny ray of light in his angry, bitter heart. Those who persevere find more happiness in earning love than in gaining it. Well, perhaps that was true. He had certainly not gained anything, but at least he had been happy making the Noah's Ark and thinking of Danny's pleasure. Perhaps, if he persevered and went on putting his love into his work, someday someone would accept him and love him for it. He did not know, but he would not despair.
The person who had been called Miss Cassie now came forward, and with a haughty, negligent air, delivered her basket. As she delivered it, Legree looked in her eyes with a sneering yet inquiring glance. She fixed her black eyes steadily on him. Her lips moved slightly, and she said something in French. What it was, no one knew, but at its expression, Legree's face became perfectly demoniacal as she spoke, and he half raised his hand as if to strike, a gesture which she regarded with fierce disdain as she turned and walked away. "And now," said Legree, "come here, you Tom. You see, I told you I didn't just buy you for the common work. I mean to promote you and make a driver of you. And tonight, you may just as well begin to get your hand in. Now, you just take this to your gal and flog her. You've seen enough on it to know how." "I beg master's pardon," said Tom. "Hopes master won't set me at that. It's what I ain't used to, never did, and can't do no way possible." You'll learn a pretty smart chance at things you never did know before I have done with ye, said Legree, taking up a cowhide and striking Tom a heavy blow across the cheek, and following up the infliction with a shower of blows. There, he said, as he stopped to rest. Now will you tell me you can't do it? Yes, master, said Tom, putting up a hand to wipe the blood that trickled down his face. I'm willing to work night and day, and willing to work while there's life and breath in me. But this here thing I can't feel it right to do, and master, I never shall do it, never. Legree looked both stupefied and confounded, but at last burst forth. What? Tell me you don't think it right to do what I tell ye? What have any of you got to do with thinking what's right? I'll put a stop to it. Why, what do you think ye are? Maybe you think you're a gentleman, master, Tom, to be telling your master what's right and what ain't. So you pretend it's wrong to flog the gal. I think so, master, said Tom. The poor critter's sick and feeble. 'Twould be downright cruel. And it's what I never will do nor begin to. Master, if you mean to kill me, kill me. But as to raising my hand against anyone here, I never shall. I'll die first. Tom spoke in a mild voice, but with decision that could not be mistaken. Legree shook with anger, but, like some ferocious beast that plays with its victim before he devours it, he kept back his strong impulse to proceed to immediate violence, and instead burst forth into bitter raillery. Well, here's a pious one at last, let down among us sinners, a saint, a gentleman, and no less, to talk to us sinners about our sins. Powerful, holy critter he must be. Here, you rascal, you make believe to be so pious. Didn't you never hear out of your Bible, servants, obey your masters? Ain't I your master? Didn't I pay down $1,200 cash for all there is inside your old shell? Ain't your mind now, body and soul, he said, giving Tom a violent kick with his heavy boot. Tell me. In the very depth of physical suffering, and bowed by brutal oppression, this question shot a gleam of joy and triumph through Tom's soul. Suddenly he stretched himself up, and looking earnestly to heaven, while the tears and blood that flowed down his face mingled, he exclaimed, No, no, no. My soul ain't yours, master. You haven't bought it. You can't buy it. It's been bought and paid for by one that is able to keep it. No matter, you can't harm me.
The martyr, when faced even by a death of bodily anguish and horror, finds in the very terror of his doom a strong stimulant and tonic. There is a vivid excitement, a thrill, a fervor, which may carry through any crisis of suffering that is the birth hour of eternal glory and rest. But to live, to wear on, day after day, of mean, bitter, low, harassing servitude, every nerve dampened and depressed, every power of feeling gradually smothered. This long and wasting heart martyrdom, this slow daily bleeding away of the inward life, drop by drop, hour after hour, this is the true searching test of what there may be found in man or woman. When Tom stood face to face with his persecutor and heard his threats, and thought in his very soul that his hour was come, his heart swelled bravely in him, and he thought he could bear torture and fire, bear anything with the vision of Jesus in heaven but just a step beyond. But when he was gone, and the present excitement passed off, came back the pain of his bruised and weary limbs, came back the sense of his utterly degraded, helpless, forlorn estate, and the day passed wearily enough. Is it strange that the religious peace and trust which had upheld him hitherto should give way to tossings of soul and despondent darkness? The gloomiest problem of this mysterious life was constantly before his eyes. Souls crushed and ruined, evil triumphant, and God silent. It was weeks and months that Tom wrestled in his own soul, in darkness and sorrow. He thought of Miss Ophelia's letter to his Kentucky friends and would pray earnestly that God would send him deliverance. And then he would wait, day after day, in the vague hope of seeing someone sent to redeem him. And when no one came, he would crush back to his soul bitter thoughts. that it was vain to serve God, that God had forgotten him. He sometimes saw Cassie, and sometimes, when summoned to the house, caught a glimpse of the dejected form of Emmeline, but he held very little communion with either. In fact, there was no time for him to commune with anybody. When a heavy weight presses the soul to the lowest level at which endurance is possible, there is an instant and desperate effort of every physical and moral nerve to throw off the weight. Hence, the heaviest anguish often precedes a return tide of joy and courage. So it was now with Tom. The atheistic taunts of his cruel master sent his before dejected soul to the lowest ebb, and though the hand of faith still held the eternal rock, it was with a numb, despairing grasp. Tom sat, like one stunned at the fire. Suddenly, everything around him seemed to fade, and a vision rose before him of one crowned with thorns, buffeted and bleeding. Tom gazed in awe and wonder at the majestic patience of the face. The deep, pathetic eyes thrilled him to his inmost heart. His soul woke as with floods of emotion, and in splendor inconceivable, he saw the same face bend compassionately down towards him. The sharp thorns became rays of glory, and a voice said, "He that overcometh shall sit down with me on my throne, even as I overcame and am set down with my Father on his throne."
Once, books appealed to a few people, here, there, and everywhere. They could afford to be different. The world was roomy. Then, the world got full of eyes and elbows and mouths. Double, triple, quadruple population. Films and radios, magazines, books leveled down to a sort of paste-pudding norm. Do you follow me? Picture it, 19th century man with his horses, dogs, carts, slow motion. Then, in the 20th century, speed up your camera, books cut shorter, condensations, digests, tabloids. Everything boils down to the gag, the snap ending. Classics cut to 15-minute radio shows, then cut again to fill a 2-minute book column, winding up finally as a 10 or 12-line dictionary resume. I exaggerate, of course. The dictionaries were merely for reference. Whose sole knowledge of Hamlet, you know the title, certainly Montague. It's probably but a faint rumor to you, Mrs. Montague. Whose sole knowledge of Hamlet was a 1-page digest in a book titled, "Now at least you can read all the classics. Keep up with your neighbors." Do you see? Out of the nursery, into the college, and back to the nursery. There's your intellectual pattern for the last 5 centuries or more. Speed up the film, Montague. Quick, peek, look, eye, here, there. Swift, pace, up, down, in, out. Who, how, why, what, where, smack, wallop, bing, bong, boom. Digest, 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 digest. Politics? 1 column, 2 sentences, a headline. Then, suddenly, in midair, all vanishes under the pumping hands of publishers, exploiters, broadcasters that flings off the centrifuge of all unnecessary, time-wasting thought. School is shortened, discipline relaxed, histories, philosophies, languages dropped, English and spelling gradually neglected, finally almost completely ignored. Life is immediate. The pleasure lies around after work. Why waste time learning anything, save pressing buttons, pulling switches, fixing nuts and bolts? Life becomes one big pratfall, Montague. Now, shall we take up the minorities in our civilization? The bigger the population, the more the minorities. Do not step on the toes of the dog lovers, the cat lovers, merchants, doctors, lawyers, chiefs, Mormons, Baptists, Unitarians, second-generation Chinese, Swedes, Italians, Germans, Texans, Brooklynites, Irishmen, people from Oregon or Mexico. These people in this play, this TV serial, are not meant to represent any actual painters, cartographers, or mechanics anywhere. No. All the minor minorities with their navels to be kept clean, authors full of evil thoughts to lock up their typewriters. They did. Magazines become a nice blend of vanilla tapioca. Books stopped selling, the Christian snobbish critics said. No wonder we're dishwater. No wonder books stopped selling, the Christian snobbish critics said. See, Montague, it did not, but the public, knowing what it wanted, spinning happily, said, let the comic books survive. See, Montague, it did not come from the government. There was no declaration, no dictum, no censorship to start with. No.
Tom had become indifferent to persecution. Tom had become indifferent to persecution. By this time, this indifference caused Aunt Polly a lot of trouble. Now she had heard of painkiller for the first time. She ordered a lot at once. She tasted it, and was filled with instant gratitude, for it was simply fire in liquid form. She dropped the water treatment and everything else, and pinned her faith to painkiller. She gave Tom a teaspoonful and watched with the deepest anxiety for the result. Her troubles at rest, her soul at peace again, for the boy could not have shown a wilder, hardier interest if she had lit a fire under him. Tom felt that this life was romantic enough in his blighted condition, but it was getting to have too little sentiment and too much distracting variety about it. So he thought over various ideas, and finally professing to be fond of painkiller, he asking for it so often that he became a nuisance. And his Aunt Polly ended by telling him to quit bothering her and help himself. If it had been Sid, she would have had no misgivings to allure her delight. But since it was Tom, she watched the bottle clandestinely and noticed that the medicine really did diminish, but it did not occur to her that the boy was mending the health of a crack in the sitting room floor with it. One day, as Tom was in the act of dosing the crack, his aunt's yellow cat, Peter, came along, eyeing the teaspoon avariciously, begging for a taste. Tom said, "Don't ask for it unless you want it, Peter." But Peter signified he did want it. "Are you sure?" Peter was sure. "Now, since there ain't anything mean about me, I'll give it to you. But if you don't like it, you mustn't blame anyone but your own self." Peter was agreeable, so Tom pried open his mouth and poured down the painkiller. Peter sprang a couple yards into the air, then ran round and round the room, creating havoc, upsetting flower pots and banging against furniture. Next he rose on his 2 hind feet and pranced round, with his head over his shoulder, proclaiming his unappeasable happiness. Then he continued to run around the room, creating havoc, before Aunt Polly came around to see Peter's final hurrah. He ran and jumped through the window, knocking over the rest of the flower pots. Aunt Polly stood there, petrified, peering over her glasses. Tom lay on the floor, expiring with laughter.
"Lucy," said she, not quite understanding him. "But you are, forgive me, you are what they call a girl." "Of course I'm a girl," said Lucy. "You are, in fact, human?" "Of course I'm a human," said she, still a little puzzled. To be sure, said the fawn. "How stupid of me. But I've never seen a son of Adam or a daughter of Eve before. I am delighted. That is to say," and then, It stopped, as if I had been going to say something it had not intended, but had remembered in time. Delighted, into the dawn. Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Tumnus. I'm very pleased to meet you, Mr. Tumnus, said Lucy. And may I ask, O Lucy, daughter of Eve, said Mr. Tumnus, how you came to Narnia? Narnia? What's that? Why, this is the land of Narnia, where we are now, all that lies between the lamppost and the great city of Cair Paravel on the eastern sea. You've come from the wild woods of the west. But I got in through the wardrobe, in the spare room. Oh, little Tumnus, if only I had worked harder at geography when I was a little fawn, I should no doubt know all about these strange countries. It's too late now. But they aren't countries at all, said Lucy, almost laughing. It's only just back there. At least, I think so. It's summer there. Meanwhile, said Tumnus, it is winter in Narnia. It has been for ever so long. And we shall both catch cold when we stand here talking in the snow. O daughter of Eve, from the fair land of Spare Un, where eternal summer reigns around the bright city of Wardrome. How would it be if you came and had tea with me? It's very kind of you, Mr. Tumnus, but I was wondering whether I ought to be getting back. It's only just around the corner, said the fawn, and there'll be a roaring fire, toast, sardines, and cake. Well, thank you very much, but I shan't be able to stay long. If you will give me your arm, daughter of Eve, I shall be able to hold the umbrella over both of us. That's the way. Now off we go.
The eastern sky was already tinged a misty, pale shade of green, framed at the base by a sharper boundary of saffron. Branches with silvered leaves, the white walls of nearing villages, and the tall arches of the viaducts that ran across the plain toward Rome could be seen in the shadows. Gold seeped into the greenish sky and filled it with brightness, and then a reddening, rosy glow bloomed in the east behind the Alban hills, painting them lilac and making them seem spun wholly out of light. Dawn's pearly light trembled on the dew that clung to the leaves. The mist receded, opening a broader vista to the level plains, villas, cemeteries, small country towns and groves, and white temple columns gleaming among the trees. The road was empty. The farmers who brought their produce to the market were still harnessing their carts. The echo of travelers' wooden clogs echoed in the silence, coming from the flagstones that covered the highway all the way to the hills. The sun rose to the mountain passes, and a strange sight bemused the apostle. It suddenly seemed as if the golden sphere had ceased to climb higher into the sky, that it had slipped down the hillside ahead of them and was rolling down the road towards them. Peter halted. "Do you see the brightness that's coming towards us?" "I see nothing, Master," Nazarius replied. Peter shaded his eyes against the light. "Someone is coming to us in the glow of the sunlight." They heard no footsteps. The silence lay undisturbed around them. Nazarius merely saw the distant trees trembling as if brushed in passing, and the great light spread wider across the plain. But it was the apostle who alarmed him more. "Rabbi," he cried, "what's wrong? What's the matter with you?" The traveling staff fell out of Peter's hand, his eyes fixed immovably ahead. His lips were open. His face reflected unbelievable surprise, immense joy, and rapturous exultation. Suddenly he threw himself to his knees, his arms lifted up and stretched towards the light. His lips cried out, "Christ, O Christ!" His face beat against the dust as if kissing the feet of someone only he could see. Then there was silence. "Quo vadis, Domini?" the apostle asked at last, his voice punctured by sobbing. "Where are you going, Lord?"
Nazarius heard no answer, but a voice of ineffable sweetness and abundant sorrow rang in Peter's ears. "When you abandon my people," he heard, "I must go to Rome to be crucified once more." The apostle lay still and silent with his face pressed into the dust. Nazarius thought he either died or fainted, but he rose at last, picked up his pilgrim staff, and turned again towards the 7 hills. "Quo vadis, Domini?" the boy asked in an echo of the apostle's cry. "To Rome." Then he returned.
I saw, coming towards us, a ghost who carried something on his shoulder. Like all ghosts, he was unsubstantial. What sat on his shoulder was a little red lizard. It was twitching its tail like a whip and whispering things into his ear. As we caught sight of him, he turned his head to the reptile with a snarl of impatience. "Shut up, I tell you," he said. It wagged its tail and continued to whisper to him. He ceased snarling and presently began to smile. Then he turned and started to limp westward, away from the mountains. "Off so soon," said a voice. The speaker was more or less human in shape, but larger than a man, and so bright that I could hardly look at him. "Yes, I am off," said the ghost. "Thanks for all your hospitality, but it's no good, you see. I told this little chap that he'd have to be quiet if he came, which he insisted on doing, but he will not stop. I shall just have to go home." "Would you like me to make him quiet?" said the flaming spirit, an angel as I now understood. "Of course I would," said the ghost. "Then I will kill him." "Oh, ow, look out, you're burning me, keep away," said the ghost, retreating. "Don't you want him killed?" "You didn't say anything about killing him at first. I hardly meant to bother you with anything so drastic as that." "It is the only way," said the angel, whose burning hands were now very close to the lizard. "Shall I kill it?" "Well, that's a further question. I'm quite open to consider it, but it's a new point, isn't it? I mean, for the moment, I was only thinking about silencing it, because up here, well, it's so embarrassing." "May I kill it?" "I don't think there's the slightest necessity for that. I'm sure I shall be able to keep it in order now. I think the gradual process is far better than killing it." "The gradual process is of no use at all. There is no other day. All days are present now." "Get back, you're burning me. How could I tell you to kill it? You'd kill me if you did." "It is not so." "Why? You're hurting me now." "I never said it wouldn't hurt you. I said it wouldn't kill you. I cannot kill it against your will. It is impossible. Have I your permission?" Then the lizard began chattering to the ghost. "Be careful," it said. "He can do what he says. He can kill me. Then you'd be without me forever and ever. How could you live? You'd be only a sort of ghost, not a real man as you are now. He doesn't understand. He's only a cold, bloodless, abstract thing. It may be natural for him, but it isn't for us. I admit, I've sometimes gone too far in the past, but I promise I won't do it again." "Have I your permission?" said the angel to the ghost. "I know it will kill me." "You're right. It would be better to be dead than to live with this creature." "Then I may." "Blast you, go on, can't you? Get it over, do what you like," bellowed the ghost, but ended whimpering, "God help me, God help me." The next moment, the ghost gave a scream of agony such as I have never heard on earth. The burning one closed his crimson grip around the reptile, twisted it while it bit and writhed, and then flung it, broken-backed, on the turf. Then I saw an unmistakably solid, but growing every moment, the upper arms and shoulder of a man. Then, brighter still and stronger, the legs and hands. The neck and the golden head materialized while I watched. What distracted me was the fact that at the same moment, something seemed to be happening to the lizard. Its hinder parts grew rounder. Its tail, still flickering, became a tail of hair that flickered between a huge, glossy buttocks. Suddenly, I started back. What stood before me was the greatest stallion I had ever seen, silvery white, but with mane and tail of gold. The new-made man clapped the new horse's neck. It nosed his bright body. Horse and master breathed each into the other's nostrils. The man turned, flung himself at the feet of the burning one, and embraced them.
There was once a Velveteen Rabbit, and in the beginning, he was really splendid. He was fat and bunchy, as a rabbit should be. His coat was spotted brown and white. He had real thread whiskers, and his ears were lined with pink satin. On Christmas morning, when he sat wedged in the top of the boy's stocking with a sprig of holly between his paws, the effect was charming. There were other things in the stocking: nuts and oranges and a toy engine and chocolate almonds and a clockwork mouse. But the rabbit was quite the best of all. For at least 2 hours, the boy loved him. And then aunts and uncles came to dinner, and there was a great rustling of tissue paper and unwrapping of parcels. And in the excitement of looking at all the new presents, the Velveteen Rabbit was forgotten. For a long time, he lived in the toy cupboard or on the nursery floor, and no one thought very much about him. He was naturally shy, and being only made of velveteen, some of the more expensive toys quite snubbed him. The mechanical toys were very superior and looked down upon everyone else. They were full of modern ideas and pretended they were real. The model boat, who had lived through 2 seasons and lost most of his paint, caught the tone from them and never missed an opportunity of referring to his rigging in technical terms. The rabbit could not claim to be a model of anything, for he didn't know that real rabbits existed. He thought they were all stuffed with sawdust like himself. And he understood that sawdust was quite out of date and should never be mentioned in modern circles. Even Timothy, the jointed wooden lion, who was made by the disabled soldiers and should have had broader views, put on airs and pretended he was connected with government. Between them all, the poor little rabbit was made to feel himself very insignificant and commonplace, and the only person who was kind to him at all was the Skin Horse. The Skin Horse had lived longer in the nursery than any of the others. He was so old that his brown coat was bald in patches and showed the seams underneath, and most of the hairs in his tail had been pulled out to string bead necklaces. He was wise, for he had seen a long succession of mechanical toys arrive to boast and swagger, and by break their mainsprings and pass away. And he knew that they were only toys and would never turn into anything else. For nursery magic is very strange and wonderful, and only those playthings that are old and wise and experienced, like the Skin Horse, understand all about it. "What is real?" asked the rabbit one day when they were lying side by side near the nursery fender before Nana came to tidy the room. "Does it mean having things that buzz inside you and a stick-out handle?" "Real isn't how you are made," said the Skin Horse. "It's a thing that happens to you. When a child loves you for a long, long time, not just to play with, but really loves you, then you become real." "Does it hurt?" asked the rabbit. "Sometimes," said the Skin Horse, for he was always truthful. "When you are real, you don't mind being hurt." "Does it happen all at once like being wound up?" he asked, "or bit by bit?" "It doesn't happen all at once," said the Skin Horse. "You become. It takes a long time. That's why it doesn't happen often to people who break easily or have sharp edges or have to be carefully kept. Generally, by the time you are real, most of your hair has been loved off and your eyes drop out and you get loose in the joints and very shabby. But these things don't matter at all, because once you are real, you can't be ugly, except to those people that don't understand." "I suppose you are real," said the rabbit, and then he wished he had not said it, for he thought the Skin Horse might be sensitive. But the Skin Horse only smiled. "The boy's uncle made me real," he said. "That was a great many years ago. But once you are real, you can't become unreal again. It lasts for always."
I am speaking the truth in Christ. I am not lying. My conscience bears me witness in the Holy Spirit that I have great sorrow and unceasing anguish in my heart. For I could wish that I myself were accursed and cut off from Christ, for the sake of my brothers, my kinsmen, according to the flesh. They are Israelites, and to them belong the adoption, the glory, the covenant, the giving of the law, the worship, and the promises. To them belong the patriarchs, and to their race, according to the flesh, is Christ, who is God over all, blessed forever. Amen. But it is not though the word of God has failed, for not all who are descendants of Israel belong to Israel, and not all are children of Abraham because they are his offspring. But through Isaac shall your offspring be named. This means it is not the children of the flesh who are children of God, but the children of the promise who are counted as offspring. For this is what the promise said: about this time next year I will return, and Sarah shall have a son. Not only so, but when Rebekah conceived children from one man, our forefather Isaac, though they were not yet born, had done nothing good nor bad, in order that God's purpose of election might continue, not by works, but of him who calls, she was told, the older will serve the younger. As it is written, Jacob I loved, Esau I hated. What shall we say then? Is there any injustice on God's part? By no means. For he says to Moses, I will have mercy on whom I have mercy, and I will have compassion on whom I have compassion. So then it depends not on human will or exertion, but God who has mercy. For the scripture says to Pharaoh, for this very purpose I have raised you up, that I might proclaim my name through you, and that my power might be displayed. So then he has mercy on whomever he wills, and hardens whomever he wills. You will say to me then, why does he still find fault? For who can resist his will? But who are you, O man, to answer back to God? Will what it's molded say to its molder, why have you made me like this? Has the potter no right over the clay to make from one lump a vessel for honorable use and another dishonorable use? What if God, desiring to show his wrath and to make known his power, has endured much patience with the vessels in destruction, in order to make known his glory to the vessels of mercy, which he has prepared beforehand for glory?
Before I begin making some announcements and just kind of telling you all guys to get out and have some fun, I just want to thank the students once again for the beautiful recitations that you gave us this evening, and to appreciate all the hard work that you guys have put in over the past couple of weeks, just memorizing and bringing to life these beautiful passages. It has been a true delight. I have laughed and cried and been able to think deeply, and I'm sure the audience can agree with us, or with me, I guess, that it was just a delight to behold. So thank you all so much, and let's give them one more round of applause. I also want to thank you, the audience, for coming out and showing your support and love to this group of students. We are so blessed to have such a beautiful community where that is able to take place, and we are so grateful to you as well. That being said, there are a couple of things that are available to you that could perhaps enhance the delight of this evening even more. And as it is my duty to offer these opportunities to you, you can be sure of hearing them. The first is that I'm sure as you entered the building, you saw that there is art out in the commons. This was done by the high schoolers. Some of it is finished, some of it is unfinished, but if you happen to delight in taking a glance at one or two of them, then please do so. Also in the commons are concessions. So if you've been feeling a bit peckish throughout this, then I advise you to go and hop on over and see what yummy treats are there. And lastly, well, I don't actually have anything else. So I guess I'll close by saying thank you all so much and have a wonderful rest of your evening.